Hey, it's Tyler Owen with Tmpa. Do you want to come on the Blue Grit podcast and share your story or know of an interesting story or incident you think would be neat? Hit us up at bluegrit@tmpa.org. That's bluegrit@tmpa.org. You guys take care, be safe, God bless you. And as always, may God bless Texas.
And all of a sudden, that's when they saw the muzzle flash. It's like, poof, 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 poof. And then I moved to my left. I'm like, oh, shit, I'm getting shot at. And at that point, I felt a tap on my shoulder. One of our SWAT guys had his long gun. He's like, we got this, Eric. I back up, and then I start feeling the pain in my left foot. So you're sitting there, and I got to call my wife, right?
Hey, Blue Grit Podcast. We are back this week with your host, Clint McNear, and
Tyler Owen.
Tyler Owen. How are you?
Good, good. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
It was good. I worked at the ranch. We cut hay and
That doesn't sound fun.
vaccinated some calves, and that was it. Just worked a little bit the entire time. How about you?
Good, good. I had good, actually, Blue Grit podcast listener, fan, good family friend of mine, Chris Dennis and his wife and kids came down. Longtime friends of mine came down and visited us in Wimberley, and so we hung out on the San Marcos River, drank some beer.
Nice.
And then did the whole Wimberley thing and hung out by the creek and just chilled. It was great. It's hot. It was extremely hot. So
I'm back in the gym, finally, fat and 51. In the entire weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I took PTO Monday. In 4 days, on a holiday weekend, I drank 2 beers. I was really proud of that.
I am proud of you. I mean, I can't say that that happened to me over this last weekend, but I will say this. Speaking of beer, this guy, I love him to death. Like he's like I don't have any brothers or sisters, and so Chris, I hope if you're listening to this episode, I hope you don't get upset. But if you're going to go to the river, okay, Guadalupe, San Marcos, and you know you're going to be there all day, I'm asking you, how much beer do you think you would take if you're not driving? I mean, you're not going to be there
for you or a normal human.
If you were going to go to the river at 10 o'clock in the morning and be there, all day long, for you and your spouse, 18-pack probably?
For me,
Yeah.
I would probably bring a 12-pack.
Okay.
For you, I would probably bring a 30-pack.
Me and Curtis Billings, absolutely.
For you and Curtis Billings, I'd bring 2 30-packs.
Yeah. So to give you a kind of an idea, we had a ride. Me and Janet, we packed, because that's one thing I will never go without is beer. And so we had plenty of beer, and Chris bought a 6-pack. A 6-pack.
That's just enough to make a man angry.
Yeah, and so when I checked out, I was done. It was already too late. So I see him walking to the truck, and I'm just like,
Curtis calls that breakfast.
yeah, that's right. So he gets in the truck. I said, "What's up, bro? You forget the rest of that package there?" And he said, "Oh, I got beer." I said, "Okay, all right. I know how this is going." He said, "I got plenty." So like an hour into this, his 6-pack was gone. So anyway, that's how my weekend went. It was a good weekend though.
Who we got on?
This podcast, when me and you were in D.C., one of the most rewarding things that we had happen to us when we were up there is people walking up and telling us really the impact that this podcast has had. It's an honor to be a part of it from a Tmpa standpoint and from a personal standpoint. But, man, you reached out and said, hey, I've listened to a couple of y'all's episodes. It's amazing what you guys are doing. And so I'll let you intro and talk about you. But man, thank you for coming down or coming over, I guess, coming from Florida. And so you got an interesting story and just an amazing story, you being a previous cop in Florida. So come on.
All right. Well, thanks. I'm Eric Reynolds. I'm from Boynton Beach, Florida. Actually, I'm from Miami, but I was a cop in Boynton Beach, Florida for about 19 years. I left in 2019, right before COVID. Not for any particular reason. It was just that right time for me. I'm a son of a homicide sergeant from Miami-Dade. You may have seen her in the Griselda episodes. She's the detective June Hawkins that stars in that role. She's the character it was based off of, so that was a pretty cool story to see, going back in history that when I was 10 years old, my mom was this super badass cop, and my stepfather's in the show too, and then seeing them both on screen as their old characters is pretty wild. And realizing I'm the third best cop in the family, it kind of sucks, But
So you were born in Miami?
yeah, I was born in Miami.
Okay.
Yeah, actually born in Key West, grew up in Miami. The military thing bounces you around a lot. So you're like,
Yeah.
well, where did I really grow up? But Miami is where I, played high school football, and that was like what made me. And growing up down there with, obviously that, the cop influence and all that, I ended up going to Florida State University, get my degree in '94, and catching shoplifters. And I started with Boynton Beach in 2001.
What was your degree in?
Criminal justice, minor in business.
Yeah.
All the typical stuff that, I'm going to be criminology. I don't know what the heck it's going to mean. I like this stuff. It's crime. I knew it. It was an easier major to have. It wasn't a lot of hard, like, investigative work to figure out crime, but a lot of it's theory-based and research methods and all that crap.
So my dad was a big homicide detective at Dallas PD. Your mom was a hotshot homicide detective at Miami. Did you know all along you were, number one, did you know all along you were going to be a cop? And number two, it's weird growing up in that environment. I mean, it was really weird because you don't get away with stuff. My dad would look at me and go, okay, you're lying right now, so go ahead and tell me about that. And did you know, because I didn't know real young, but I realized probably in my teens, I'm like, yeah, it's all my family's ever done. I'm going to end up doing that too.
I was kind of coached a little bit to go the federal route. My mom was like, you don't want to be a local cop.
I can see that.
Because she had, she was thinking at that time, I think it was customs was one of the issues or departments I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I applied with Secret Service, FBI, all those. And they didn't want a college kid. And I didn't have language. I didn't have computer skills and anything with law. I didn't have that. So those doors shut. And you're sitting around and you're like, well, I'm catching shoplifters, running down these guys through parking lot. And this is in the 90s. We were cowboys down in Florida. We could chase you till we caught you.
Yeah.
And we're knocking other stores' stuff down when we were running through there. And it was so much fun. And, it was hand-to-hand combat. I didn't have any tools.
Yeah.
So you better make sure you win it.
I've seen that scene off Grand Theft Auto. I played a couple of those scenes.
Yeah,
The game.
And then we ended up just, the cops were like, hey, man, when are you going to join us? You get a pension. And that's what started sticking with me. I started thinking about the private sector and retail security. And then they could just come Monday say, you're an expense and you're gone. So I was like, man, I do want a union, some protection or something like that. So I started applying at the police department in Boynton and got on. But you mentioned about you're trying to outsmart your folks. In 75, my mom get hired, I'm 6. So now she's in homicide in 3 years, because she knew Spanish, was able to go behind the scenes. And I'm trying to outsmart her, right? And one of the things I had done one time was I kicked a hole in the hamper. I was all pissed at her. My dad wasn't around, so I always had this little edge to me. And I flipped the hamper around. She won't find it, right? She found it. And then she came to the door with a broom and said, give me your money. You're paying for that hamper. And I had to hand over my money. So my mom just literally armed robbed me to get the money for the hamper I broke. And little things, like you're grounded, you can't watch TV, and I'd watch TV. She pulls in the driveway, and I turn TV off and wash dishes. She comes up to the TV and feel it. Freaking hot.
Yep.
So
That's
I couldn't get
awesome.
away with any of this stuff.
That's awesome.
I mean, I got away with some stuff. I mean, there's little white lies and things you get away with. But the major stuff, I was always accountable. And I didn't want her to even have to ever come get me or anything like that. So I understand that fear. Mine was a woman.
That's awesome. So about 14, snuck out, crawl back in the window, had a buddy spending the night. It goes on for a couple of days. I'm like, dude, I got away with that so freaking smooth. I am slick. About 3 days later, we're driving down the road. My dad's driving. Never looks over at me. He goes, where'd you go the other night? It's like, the other night. He goes, yeah, where'd you go? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. He never looks over. Huh. So you didn't go anywhere? No, sir. Huh. So the dirt on the inside of the windowsill and the footprint in the flower bed that matches your tennis shoe, that wasn't you. I guess the gardener did all that. I was like, well, what had happened was, if I could explain just a minute, and I was like, son of a biscuit, man. Just Columbo style, let it go for 2 days before the interrogation commenced. I'm like, God Dang it.
He built a case against you.
Oh, it was a done deal. I need a lawyer, Dad.
That's crazy. And she's also your mom. She was Colombian.
Just Cuban.
Cuban. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the
talk
things. They had the actress that was playing my mom. She's Colombian. So they needed my mom would actually got hired on as an advisor. So she was working with the dialogue of how, someone who's Cuban would say something versus someone who's Colombian.
Oh, yeah,
dialects.
Yeah.
My mom was able to tell at one point someone's accents from Medellin to some of the other cities in Colombia. She could tell because she was that much into understanding the language. And, she's bilingual. She knows both languages, so she's very fluent in it.
Yeah.
So she was able just to pick off, like, he's from that town, and it's crazy, because I'm not even fluent. I can survive, but I never practiced it like she did, going to Cuba, coming back, she was going there before Castro, and then obviously when that got taken over, she never has been back ever since. So.
And you dive into dialects, and it's amazing how different within a specific language just all the many dialects can be.
Yeah.
So how old was your mom when she came from Cuba?
Well, she was born in Miami.
Oh, okay.
But my aunt was born in Cuba. They came over in 47. My father was my grandfather was from North Carolina. He was in the textile business. They went down the Caribbean, for all the textile business.
Gotcha.
And that's where he met this attractive Cuban lady and brought her back. So
Nice.
Seems to happen that way sometimes.
sometimes you got to leave, find someone.
Yep.
So explain your department that you worked at. It's kind of was it a small quiet town? Was it a kind of attached to Miami as far as a city life? Kind of talk about the department.
All right. So Boynton Beach is I'd say about 16 square miles, about 160,000 roughly. Our department's 160 man, well short like most departments, but it's manageable. We have the beach. We have our poverty areas. We have our rich golf course areas. We have our shopping malls. It's got everything a big city has. It's Boynton Beach, so we're in between Delray, West Palm Beach. You got the Boca Raton.
Oh, yeah,
So it's all, we're connected to Fort Lauderdale and Miami, so some of that riffraff makes it up to us.
Middle class, upper middle class?
Middle class, and you got your lower middle class areas. But overall, I would say it's a middle class area.
Yeah.
And we were very busy. We had our little task, we had little units that would obviously work with bigger agencies, but we had our own units within. But that's also some of the issues with a smaller department too. You have you step on the wrong toe when you're a rookie, and you'll never save yourself. There's nowhere else to go sometimes.
What year did you start there?
In 2001.
Was it still big, the cocaine cowboy days, or was that kind of towards the tail end of the big?
They love their cocaine down in Florida, man. That was all we were getting. Until the opiate crisis hit, and we started getting all the people, pill mills and all that stuff. But it's always been the cocaine and the crack, man. It's just, that's our industry down there. That's what's booming. I don't know if they come down, they see Miami Vice or something, was it Scarface, and they're like, I'm going to do some blow or something.
Yeah.
Hell, in 2001, there wasn't many meth labs weren't a big deal in Florida.
No,
because here in Texas, it was a huge problem. Not probably so much in the Metroplex, but in the rural areas, that's what.
Yeah, we had a bunch of labs.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall us really having any labs nearby. We had a lot of the riffraff coming down to buy and purchase and OD in a McDonald's parking lot or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Do you like cussing us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we do it all the time.
I don't want to be rude. So,
Just don't tell her.
it was.
Teller said, hell yeah.
It was pretty, and then we got into the investigations of some of the stuff, our vice units and stuff. We start looking at some of these doctors, and then you start realizing how corrupt that side of it is. And, later in life, that helped me understanding how corrupt the medical system was to help my own, life and my own health issues I was having. But it's a great little city, man. And we train a lot of really good cops that go on to other agencies.
That's cool.
So the sheriff will come down, pluck our best guys, typical. And you're like, oh, you don't take the bad ones. You always take the good guy, right?
Yeah.
But, I would never change it. I loved it. I did a lot of great things, from bicycle units to jump out teams to, saturation patrols. I did some time in traffic, so I was well-rounded. And then I was, looking at maybe getting promoted, doing the FTO, looking at starting the FTO program. And that's when I got shot in 2012, and it kind of changed my whole direction of where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I'd still be working if I didn't get shot, probably.
Let's talk about that day. Let's talk about kind of how that day started and walk us through it.
So it was Everyone always starts off, oh, it was a typical day. Now, I was leaving early to go play basketball with my friends, and I knew I had to be out of there by 6 o'clock. So 5 o'clock, they sent a bolo out, bank robbery, nearby jurisdiction in Del Rey. There's a red Crown Vic with a white top. I'm like, who the heck robs a bank with a red car and a white top? You know, that seemed odd to me. Right, Crown Vic, you know, some hoopy driving away with money and flying out the window or something. So I was like, that's kind of odd. But most of the time they hit 95 or they disappear or something, you know. And this particular day I was just, you know, I remember they sent the night guys on, and I was the only available unit. I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to get stuck with something. And that means I'm not going to be able to go home. You know, so I go, dispatch, let me jump on this call. And they're like, all right. So I'm boloing the area, and then I see a red Lincoln coming over the bridge from the beach side, and it's got a white top. And didn't really know 100%, but, you know, you can investigate it. And as I drove by, I remember looking, and then one of the other guys on the radio was like, Eric, after I advised, hey, there's a red car coming over the bridge. They're like, can you see the driver? And that's when I was driving by, because I wasn't behind him, I wasn't in front of him, I was just passing parallel to him. And I look, and I can see the hand. And it was a black male. All I could see was the hand. And his hand was tapping on the steering wheel. Like he saw me. I felt it to the core. He knew I was there, and that was eerie. Because most people, when you pass them in traffic, they're like, oh, it's a cop. You know, they might be nervous. But this, he had a tell at that point. And when I turned back around, I had to make a U-turn to see him. And then he made a right. So now he's going the opposite direction. So I got to make another U-turn to get behind him. And he gunned it. So I'm like, it's not really a car chase yet. I haven't hit my lights, and I started to turn around, catch up to him a little bit, and he slows down. I'm still trying to figure this cat out. And he's got a handicap tag. On Boynton Beach in Florida, there's a lot of handicapped people. I'm like, you know, it doesn't mean it's the car, you know. And then he stops right in the middle of US 1. I didn't light him up. He just stopped. It's a pretty busy road, so to be stopping is weird. And we do have a lot of diabetic patients, you know, sometimes there's diabetic comas, and, you know, so I'm still thinking of all these possibilities, how it's not the bank robber. Handicap tag, you know. And as we're sitting there and waiting for backup, you know, I've already told dispatch he stopped. And it was about 3 or 4 seconds. It feels like an eternity looking back. And I remember sitting there, I looked up at my camera, and it was off. I had an old, I think it was a 2006.
Mobile vision?
Yeah, well, it would sometimes with the vibrations would disconnect the wires, so that you bang it and it would come back on. It was one of those old school cars. And I looked up, and the camera wasn't even on. So I hit the power button as I'm sitting there watching him, and then he took off. Just left. I'm like, oh, shit, you know, here's my chase. Sirens, taking off dispatch. At that point, our DUI guy was coming on shift, just left the city pumps to get gas, and he was the closest backup, and he was waiting. He made a U-turn behind us, and now we're in the chase. And he drives through some parking lots. He sideswipes a couple cars trying to squeeze through, you know, nothing like a direct impact. And get about a half mile, maybe a mile or so, and he goes down a little private industrial area called Railroad Avenue, railroad tracks, you know, mechanic shops and warehouses. And it just seemed like he knew this area at this point. You know, no one makes a right when you got 95 and the big highway. Why would you take this right? I'm thinking he's going to dump the car, he's going to run, something. And he happened to make a quick left turn as we were going down railroad, a little tight, and he hit another car that was coming the opposite way. They hit head on. Not in a very good tactical spot because I didn't expect him to come to a sudden stop. So all of a sudden I'm right there with him. And as I get out of the car, I see his door starting, you know, there's smoke, and, you know, the sirens are going, everything like you see in the movies or you see in dash cameras now, everything like it was going on. Getting out of the car, is he going to run? You know, what's going on? I see the door, he can't get it open. It's, you know, he can open it partially, but you see it swinging for a second. I'm like, oh, what's he going to do? And all of a sudden, that's when they saw the muzzle flash. It was like, poof, 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 poof. And then I moved to my left. I'm like, oh, shit, I'm being shot at, you know, and I start firing. I think I hit the house behind the car. I was just trying to, like, suppression fire, stop shooting at me until I can recover. At that time, Monroe had pulled up, and he was already out, and he starts firing. So now we're both firing at this guy, and then he moves with me and blades with me eventually. And the suspect couldn't get the door open all the way to keep shooting. So he's, like, trying to shoot like this instead of going through the window. Like most bad guys would, or us, we would just shoot through the damn window, right? Well, he wasn't thinking that, and we peppered him. We put about 38 rounds into that car. We hit him 14 times. He died on the scene. It was about a 2-minute shooting. I mean, if you go through the YouTube video, it's from the start to finish. That's a long time because he was he kept moving. You can see his hands moving. Like, we never saw the weapon. He wasn't responding to our calls. Of course, you got all the other things going on, you know, the sirens and the gunfire and all that. And I remember giving verbal commands, and then Monroe and I walked up to the car looking, and he was still trying to play with the gun and shit. And then we just laid some more rounds in, and then stopped moving. And at that point, I felt a tap on my shoulder. One of our SWAT guys had his long gun. He's like, "We got this, Eric." I back up, and then I start feeling the pain in my left foot. Like, what the heck happened? I look down. I got 3 holes through my shoe, and I got my right leg's bleeding. And I'm like, "Oh, shit, I got hit." So I back up. I'm not feeling anything yet. It wasn't any bone or nothing. It was just muscle and nerves. So the adrenaline was enough to keep me in the fight. And I back up and told another guy, I think I got hit in the foot. And, you know, and then they're like, oh, shit, you know, officer shot and all this stuff. And then they cut the shoe off, and I'm looking at my foot with a big-ass freaking bullet wound through it. And, you know, it was surreal. Not really. You're still in the excitement of everything, you know. And it's like scoring a touchdown or something. You're like, woo, yeah, you're high-fiving everybody. And I remember getting the ambulance or the paramedic truck, and we're driving. And I remember asking the guy, I was like, "Hey, what happened to bad guy?" Because I still didn't get confirmation. I didn't see them pull him out, start CPR, you know, and all that stuff. And when I asked the paramedic, and he's like, "Nah, he's dead." And I was like, wow. This is going to be big, you know, because you have the press. Sorry. So you're sitting there, and I got to call my wife, right? So call her, got a 5-month-old son at home. That weekend was Father's Day, so it was my first Father's Day of my life. So it's hit me. I'm like, oh my God, you know, I just been through this shit. So I call her. I'm like, "Hey, honey, you know, a little incident. Got nicked in the foot. I'm going to get some stitches." And she's like, "Okay." You know, I hear my son crying in the background. She's in mommy world, has no idea what's going on in my world. And it felt good. Get that off, you know, the list. I'm like, all right, she's good. A police car is going to be showing up, scaring the hell out of her or anything. It's like, all right, well, I got to call Mike because I'm not making basketball, you know, because I was one of 10 guys. So now I got to call the guy that he goes, "Why you calling me, dude? You're on your way to the hospital." I go, I wanted credit that I was going to be there, you know. And
In school, y'all. I was going to school y'all if this hadn't happened.
well, we had at that particular day, we only had 10. So if you don't have 10, you got to run half court, right? It's always a big pain in the ass. So he was like, "Oh, what are you calling me for?" So I get to the hospital, and, you know, they're doing all their things, and all the brass comes, and I got to go home that night. They brought my wife and kid to see me, and then, you know, I remember sitting home that night watching, I was a basketball fan then, before any was fixed, and I watched the Heat play in Oklahoma, and I was like, wow, you know, and the Heat lost. Like, damn, the day I got shot, my team loses the NBA championship game, yeah. But they won.
Dwayne Wade back then.
Yeah, he was on that. It was the
Shaquille O'Neal
2012
too,
team. Yeah, this was the it was 12, so it was the LeBron. You know,
yeah.
when they hated Miami, and I'm taking my talents to South Beach stuff. So, yeah, I got home. I remember I made a triple vodka. They gave me some Percocet, and I was like, I'm just gonna watch the Heat game, you know. And I had it on DVR. And I watched it. They lost, and then right away it went straight to the news, like the DVR tape. And he goes, "Tonight at 11, another cop shot." Da-da-da. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, oh, that's me. Like, you know, I was caught up in it because at that point we were having like 3 or 4 cops had been shot in the last couple of months. So it was just like this reoccurring theme, which kind of like now it's the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, man, it's going to be the news. And then it's like, oh, they're going to release my name. Oh, you know, and then it starts bringing in all the other stuff. And you're like, my family, who's this guy? Who's he know? Who's his family? Who's his sons? You know, and it starts to creep in, you know, and, you know, 2 days later, I'm in front of a therapist. "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm good." You know, they brought me in with Monroe. What do you think? I'm going to open up with him next to me? But I wasn't ready to open up then. I didn't know anything was going on at the point. You know, at that point, I was just like, dude, I survived this shooting, and we got the bad guy. You know, you get into law enforcement to catch the bad guy. You don't think you're going to get into a shooting. But, you know, we all played cops and robbers as a kid, you know, and I won. It was like fucking awesome. But then, you know, you start, other stuff creeps in, you know, over the time. And meanwhile, I do have a wound to heal from. You know, my foot was jacked up. You know, my leg was just a graze. Luckily, it wasn't, you permanent or any real damage. But, there was some therapy and some stuff to go through.
Was that whenever you discovered the heart condition?
No, that happened in about 2018. I put on close to 40 pounds after that shooting, and I was already about 40 pounds heavy. So when that heart disease came, it was like 2018.
So on your shooting still ended up being a confirmed legit bank robbery?
Yes, he ended up being the bank robber. He had the money, and it's funny. The dispatch is like, subject had rubber boots on, a gun, and it's just like a rubber nose. Like he robbed it in like a work outfit or something. Like he was on his way home and just decided, I'm going to rob a bank today.
Do you have any history? Was he?
Yeah, he was actually known as. He's from New Orleans. He was known as N.O. And he had recently just got let out of doing a home invasion on a 98-year-old lady who couldn't identify him in a photo lineup. Being out 3 months is what it took for I went back to the road, and you get pats on the back, officer of the month, and all this stuff, and you're feeling good, and wow, and you're replaying everything over and over again, like, what if I walked up to the car when he stopped originally, when I didn't know it was him? But he would have just opened. He would probably open fire at me then.
Yeah, was he baiting you then?
So that's the kind of stuff that creeps in, And then, I went back to the road, feeling good. It was a little different. I felt a little different out there, And
in what way?
That
like more vigilant, hyper vigilant, or
hyper vigilant. I felt more seasoned, kind of, because I'd been through it now. So guys on my shift now, it was a whole different.
I won my gunfight. I've got this.
Yeah, and you get it back out there, and the call to call. I'm overthinking shit, not to where it's hurting me, but we had a regular alarm call, alarm goes off, you check the house, you're walking around, checking doors, and there was a bike leaned against the side of the house. And I remember, could be the owner's bike. And we walked to the back slider and it was cracked open. I'm like, oh, that could be a dude in here. That's his bike. You fit everything together. We clear the house, nobody there. You got alert tone, every closet, you're opening doors and, expecting to find the boogeyman. No, it was just a false alarm. The bike was the owner's, and 10-8, next call, right? Well, I was high, still jacked up, and
you're treating every single call like a shooting.
Every call, I thought, how am I going to die or how am I going to
That takes a toll.
And about 2 months later, a shoplifter fled from like Walmart, and as I'm driving up, he runs by me, and they're like, that's him, and make a U-turn and go hunt him down in this apartment complex, and found his bike, and I know he's close, but I just read FBI statistics that show just because a shoplifter doesn't mean he's not wanted for worse stuff, and they've killed people before. So I got my gun out now. I'm looking for this guy, and I come around the corner, and he's bladed up against the wall, and I'm like, get on the ground, typical verbal commands, and he reaches in his pocket, and I run on him. I'm by myself at this point, and I just throw him to the ground, and he cuffed him. And I was like, dude, why'd you reach in your pocket, man? I almost killed you, bro. He's like, I was so scared, sir. I've never had a gun pointed at me. I'll just get my ID. Like, his moment of crisis was to get an ID. And I almost blasted him. But, guess what I'm thinking about? Dude, I almost shot that dude. He was unarmed. I almost killed this guy. What would that have done? And he was a white guy, but, you start thinking, what if it was a black guy? And I shot him. He was unarmed. I'd be on freaking CNN. They'd be persecuting me. And this is before shit went crazy. So, I started boozing a lot, calming my central nervous system down. Same stuff, not talking about it because I didn't want to upset the wife, all that stuff. And I'm drinking more to kind of numb myself.
And you think it's numbing, but it's not helping.
Not at all. And it would get me through that moment, but then not realizing the damage I was doing within my family. And the stress it was causing. And this has all happened over the next couple of years. That first year, my first son was 6 months to a year. They're crawling, moving around. It wasn't impacting him, but it started to impact him later on when I started getting mad at some of his actions as a parent. Hey, what the heck you doing? You're not stupid. My reactions were a little bit more high throttled, off the cuff, real mean. All the shit that we go through that we've suffered. And knowing what it did to my kids, it's like, oh. But, going through all that and then thinking about it and then being cleared in the shooting was huge because I at least knew I wasn't going to be indicted. I mean, it's horrible to think that this guy shot me, but yet I got to think about being indicted because did we shoot him too much? Right?
Yeah.
Like I said, he was hit 14 times. There's like 4 kill shots. Me and Chris always joke around. It was my shot. Killed him first. You shot a dead guy.
I don't think it was overkill.
But,
no pun intended.
Well, I know. But, it was... You know, it was traumatic, but I didn't think it was bothering me that much at the time. I mean, I knew I was stressed out, but it was normal. Hey, you know, you've been through some shit. Sorry, have a couple drinks, you know?
Was it hard to manage your drinking around working?
I never drank at work, but man, I couldn't wait to come home 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So another thing I skipped over is after those, you know, stressful times on the road of almost pulling the trigger and all this stuff, an evidence job opened up, like out of nowhere. Who wants evidence, right? Who wants to be stuck in that little room, taking in stuff, checking stuff out? Man, I did at that point. Because Monday to Friday, you're only working one other guy. You're not battling vacations. You're not working any holidays. It was like the perfect gig for me to get into, to kind of recoup and figure things out and be a better father at this point and a husband and figure out what I want to do at this point. You know, I wasn't injured enough to go out on disability, even though that was mentioned. You know, a couple calls I went on like a Boston cop. He's like, "You're still on the job? Man, in Boston, if you got shot, you're out. That's it."
Wow.
Damn.
And all the New York cops I talked to, same thing. They're like, "You're still working?" So I didn't really think about it. I'm like, why wouldn't I still work? I could still run. I'm still athletic enough to do things. I mean, I can't feel my big toe. So if I'm at a campfire and there's ants gnawing on my toe, I'm not going to feel it, you know, until they get to the next toe. But there's little things like that. But I never felt like it was a disability thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, you know, as the weight increased, the drinking increased, and not being able to handle stress. And then also we had a new chief come in, and he thought it was stupid to have a sworn guy in evidence. He's like, "Why am I paying a cop $80,000? I can pay, you know, a civilian $40 to do the same job." Well, the reason I was in there is because the civilians were stealing the freaking money 5 years before. And one of him was he was a retired cop that was stealing the money. So, I mean, that's why we had sworn guys in there.
How old were you and how long had you been on when you got shot?
I was 42, which is right at that median age. I was 10 years on, which is right there. You know, I mean, that's usually when the stuff goes down.
How long did you do in evidence room?
I did 6 years. I got in there, 7. I got in there in 2013, and I was there till I retired. But with the Chiefs coming in and all that, you know, it stressed me out because now I'm going back out there. You know, and then what do you do? I didn't know about EAP. I knew about it, but I knew you were sellout if you went to EAP, right?
What is it? What is that?
Employment Assistance Program.
Okay.
So that's where you would go if you're having problems, and that's where your bosses tell you to go. You're almost kind of, I think guys think they're telling on themselves in a weird way, you know, and you do worry. Are you going to be put on light duty? You're going to get that stigma. You know, and then are you going to be able to work again? You know, there's all this pressure, and that's why guys don't come out with it and talk about it.
We have a lot of non-law enforcement listeners, and EAP, what he's talking about, Employee Assistance Program, is employer-provided assistance. And cops can be, rumor is we can be a little suspicious at times, a little cynical at times. But if your employer is sending you to meet with someone, among cops, a lot of times they feel that you can't trust them if my employer's paying for them. Because if I go and actually tell them, well, I'm struggling, or yeah, I'm drinking, or yeah, I'm struggling, you know, whatever, the first thing they're going to do as soon as you walk out the door is call your employer and be like, "Man, this guy's screwed up. Let me tell you what he's doing." And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the generality. That's the feeling among law enforcement is you got to find something outside of an EAP if you actually want to get help.
Well, it's hard for cops to trust really anybody anyway. So
Yeah.
for this to, you know, venture out there. So
Yeah.
And if I may, I think that system has improved because I think early on EAPs were there so the department could check a box and say, well, we tried to help you. I went through a couple of incidents during my career, and they had to send you to a shrink to get cleared to come back. And literally you would show up and the shrink's like, "You doing okay?" "Sure." "You still thinking about it?" "Sure." "You having dreams about it?" "Sure." "Well, you know that's normal, right?" Okay, well, thank you. I've checked the box. You can go back to work. We didn't accomplish anything. Did he really care if I was doing okay, or I don't think so. I think that has improved, honestly. I think the mental health industry for law enforcement and even administrations, I think, are trying to be more vigilant about it. But back when we all started,
yeah.
I think it was a box to be checked so the department could cover themselves that, well, we sent him to the shrink. We tried to fix him.
Well, look at Dallas. That's a great example of that. Would that not fall under the EAP? Would that
Yeah.
not fall under a branch of it at least?
Yeah.
So Dallas PD's got a phenomenal program. Really, I would say the foundation of what other departments are looking at, the building blocks for mental health for police, police departments and police officers. So,
Yeah, especially after what those guys went through in 2016. I mean,
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
which what
I
prompted
mean,
it.
it's okay to not be okay. I mean, that's what you got to remember. Like, that stuff is traumatic, what you're seeing, and it's not normal. It's a man-made career. You know, when we were hunters and gatherers, we weren't sitting around, you know, mopey because we killed a buffalo, right? That wasn't going on. Now it's you know, we got into this to help people. So, you know, like I killed a guy. I'm like, I didn't get in this to kill anybody. You know, I didn't get in to get killed either. But, you know, within the department, what I ended up having to do, I broke down in front of a supervisor had actually been in a shooting himself and lost his dog in a canine incident. And, you know, I trusted him. He was one of the few guys I would trust. And he goes, go to EAP, talk to them. And because I had an outstanding or an open workers' comp case because of my foot, because I had another surgery in 2014, so I kept that open. I was able to kind of piggyback off of that. But I still had to get a lawyer. I still had to go before the workers' comp board and sell my story that I needed help. They pretty much made me break down in front of a whole room of lawyers just to get the help. And then they're like, all right, you can go see this independent doctor. So I had to go see an independent doctor. Same thing. I talk about it, cry, do the whole thing. And then finally they let me go see Dr. Barnett in Palm Beach Gardens, who was known to be helping first responders. A lot of people from like, you know, from 9/11, he's helped them. And that's who I wanted to see. And they finally said, all right, now you can go see him. And I saw him twice a month for the next 5 years.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Was that the first time you thought you were having some personal healing, some growth?
When I remember walking in the first time with him, and he goes, Eric, you're going to have to learn how to dance with this, you know, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And he nailed everything I was going through. You're hypervigilant. You're not sleeping as much. You don't want to go out in the public as much. You don't want your kids and family to go out as much unless you're there. You know, you got to be the protector, right? Everything it was like right down the list. Yeah, that's me.
For our non-LE listeners, hypervigilance alone is a huge weight to bear after a critical incident, and even sustain, like working nights when you're involved in a lot of stuff. That repeated exposure causes hypertension. And for our non-LE listeners, that's when your guard is on like red alert, the highest level of alert, 24/7. And it's exhausting mentally, it's exhausting physically. Well, then if you're fighting other issues already, some PTS or whatever else you may have going on, hypervigilance is like trying to drag around two gorillas, honestly. It is exhausting. And you got to be aware. I mean, in the military and law enforcement, you got to be aware. But hypervigilance, continued hypervigilance, it's a freaking beating, man. It's like trying to tow a 18-wheeler behind your ass all day, every day.
Well, and speaking of that, you had experienced the physical demand of being hypervigilant since that incident, and that segued for many years, and it continued for many years. In 2018, I guess you went to the doctor or were having some symptoms that led you to some cardiac issues. Speaking of carrying that burden and that weight, talk about that and talk about, you know, how that was exposed, and thankfully it was, because you wouldn't be sitting here today.
Tune in next week for part 2.
So I went for that in 2019 to avoid the statins and all this other stuff, and I came back with a 1,500 score when the top is 400. So I was massive corroded with calcium in my arteries. Now at that time I'm thinking it's soft plaque, I'm going to die of a heart attack, but it's actually solid plaque. That's, you know, it's like the scar tissue healed up. I didn't know a lot about it then, and the doctor's like, you need stents. I got to get you to a cardiologist. And I'm like, doing the camping life, and everywhere I would go, I put up that thin blue line flag. You know, it's in my blood. You know, I've got officers that, you know, are on my body because of their sacrifice. And then one campground in New York says, hey man, you got to take down your flag. I'm like, what? Like,
No way.
Yep, Roundout Valley. So the guy rolled up on a golf cart, didn't get out, introduce himself, just said, hey man. And I walked over and just got done driving 6 hours from Niagara Falls. And he goes, you got to take your flag down. I'm like, oh, that's a good one, bro. You know, no, you got to take your flag down. Like, oh, you're serious. I turn on my phone. I get to record for once. That was a weird thing. And I go, what were you telling me to do again? He's like, you need to take down your thin blue line flag.